believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Fernandez, also known as Ricky Fernandez, and thank you so much for being with me. I know it's been a while since the last episode. The combination of life being crazy and people being sick and a bunch of other stuff going on in my personal life, it's been super hard to find time to release this amazing conversation I have for you today, and it's with two amazing returning guests. One is Whitney Webb, of course, the journalist, the author. We talk about her new books and much more. And then also returning guest, Dr. Jessica Rose, who is always a fan favorite. And we had a typical Ripple Effect podcast episode. It was casual. We went into some personal life stuff, and then we slowly started dipping our toe into the COVID stuff and the Epstein stuff and Whitney's new book and much more. So sit back, relax, enjoy seeing a different side of Whitney Webb and Dr. Jessica Rose. And before we get into this amazing conversation, of course, I have to remind you guys, this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of these conversations, please consider giving them some value back. And that will help get these episodes to you quicker, because if we can eventually get to the goal of getting enough support for the Ripple Effect podcast that I can do this full time, then it'll be my focus, and you'll get these shows much quicker. You'll get them much more often. So please, if you can support the show financially, please do. If you can't, no worries. Like I always tell you guys, rate the show, review the show, tell people about the show. That all goes a long way. Subscribe to the show on any video platform or audio platform you check out the show on. But if you are in a good financial situation and you can support the show, please consider doing so. And there's plenty of ways of doing it. We have a PayPal account if you want to send a one-time donation. You can also support us monthly on Patreon. And if a small percentage of the listeners, people who watch the shows on all the video platforms I'm on, or download the show on iTunes and Spotify, if a small percentage of you guys donated as little as $1 a month, I could do this full time. So that just puts in perspective how little you have to donate to help me make the Ripple Effect podcast my full-time gig. And that will help me get you episodes on a regular basis and much more often than you get them now. So please, if you can financially support the show, those are a couple ways you can do so. We also have a crypto wallet if you want to send Ethereum or Bitcoin. We have a merch store with hats, t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, cups, tons of different stuff. So please check out the rippleeffectpodcast.com for all these links and much more, or you can go directly to the merch store by going to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com. I'm sure you guys have seen me in many past episodes rock some Ripple Effect Podcast hoodies, t-shirts, mugs during these episodes. And if you like any of that stuff, please check out the merch store and just browse around, and hopefully you can find something you like. But if not, there's other ways you can help support the show. We also have some sponsors. One of our sponsors is Content Safe, and they're the ones who run my website. They're also the ones that make sure that you can find all the Ripple Effect podcast video episodes on all the video platforms. So if you're a podcaster, if you're a YouTuber, streamer, anything like that, and you want to save some time from uploading your videos on all the video platforms that you're on, check out Content Safe. They can help you with that. They'll save you tons of time, which you could be spending doing something else. And if you tell them you're a Ripple Effect podcast listener, Matt from Content Safe will definitely take care of you. Other sponsors are the University of Reason, created and run by Richard Grove from the Grand Theft World podcast. He's a dear friend of mine. He's helped a lot of people. If you're at a crossroads in life, you're looking to do something different or looking to connect with a freedom-minded, liberty-minded community, check out the autonomy courses and the University of Reason. We also have Element Electrolytes, which was formulated by past guest and a OG in the paleo and keto community, Rob Wolf. And if you're interested in trying to stay hydrated, finding something that is tasty, that's also good for you and can help with some of those symptoms that come from dehydration, like headaches and muscle fatigue and so many different things that are caused by dehydration, check out Element Electrolyte Mix. You just pour it in your water. It's sugar-free. It's keto-friendly. It won't kick you out of ketosis, and it won't kick you out of fasting. If you're a gym rat like me, or you're an athlete and you want to make sure you just stay hydrated so you don't cramp up and you perform the best you can, check out Element Electrolytes. They also have some new chocolate flavors, which are great for coffee. So if you want to stay hydrated while drinking coffee, as you know, coffee is a diuretic, so it will dehydrate you quickly. And if you add some electrolytes to your coffee, then you can stay hydrated, add some flavor to your coffee, and not worry about getting dehydrated while getting that little extra stimulant you need. Last couple ways of supporting the show, if you would like, is checking out the intro music. It's Theory 6, and Theory 6 is my solo music project. The song's called The Ripple Effect. You can find links to that also on my website, rippleeffectpodcast.com, and also my Venmo account if you want to send money that way. We also have, obviously, our videos on Rockfin, and you can tip us on Rockfin, or just watching our video episodes on Rockfin helps support the Ripple Effect Podcast. So plenty of different ways of helping the show. If you care about keeping the show going and supporting people who are truly truth seekers with no agenda, please consider supporting the Ripple Effect Podcast. And not just myself, all the independent alternative media researchers, journalists, authors, all the people that have been on my show who are doing amazing work. Support them if you can. And that's it. Enjoy this amazing conversation with journalist and author Whitney Webb and Dr. Jessica Rose. And I will talk to you guys on the next one. Peace. Long time no see.
Oh, look at my hair. I'm good. Let me just adjust some light here. Yeah, I'm good. I'm freaking running around like a crazy person, but yeah, good. How are you?
Yeah, it's same, kind of running around like a crazy person, but life hasn't slowed down a little bit since I feel like I shouldn't say the COVID's behind us, because it definitely isn't, but has life slowed down a little bit with, just other things being highlighted in the news more often than coronavirus related news?
Nope, not for me. Nope, it's just as crazy as it was like 2 years ago. It might even be crazier. Yeah, it's nonstop. Like this is my schedule. Like it's almost like every single day there's something to do. And
hey, hello. Hey, Ricky.
Hey, how are you, Whitney?
Doing okay. Hi, Jessica. Long time no talk.
Hi, good to see you again.
Likewise.
Oh, shit, I meant to get him. What?
Seems like there's a lag. Is that on my end, or are you in? Is anyone else on slow Wi-Fi land?
It did seem like Jessica was a tad behind, but I know her internet.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's me for sure, I think. Not much I can do about that.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't me, because I was going to change like connection or something.
You sound and yeah, it's probably I'm kind of used to it, so I probably didn't even notice. It's Jessica. Sometimes it comes in great, and then sometimes it goes in and out. But that's just, your neck of the woods is just they gotta up their internet game, I guess.
It's all right. I live in South America, so I get it. No big deal.
That's right, Chile, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, still here.
So
at least it's like warm out. It's nice.
Yeah, I'm sure. And the wines.
Yep.
don't know if you're a wine drinker, but chili and wine.
Well, yeah, if you're into wine, it's like super cheap. The price of everything else will go up because of inflation, but wine stays the same.
That's how Portugal.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Portugal is the same thing. It's so cheap to eat. Like everything is homegrown and from natural or from local farms and stuff like that. And the wine and food's really cheap, but everything else is super expensive. So it's at least you can
Mm.
drink and socialize and enjoy some company at a not so expensive rate. So that's always good. But so as your life got, we were just talking about if life has slowed down or been busier with Jessica since kind of COVID's taken a little bit of a backseat to so many other news stories. But how's your life? Because now with obviously
Oh, dude. Yeah, I mean, it's mental. Well, I don't know. My whole year's been really crazy. So I had like this deadline with the book. I had a kid who's about to turn a year old, so I had like baby time on top of it. The book was really exhausting. And I wrote other stuff too, like while I was doing it. Probably shouldn't have, and had a podcast, and I might have overdone. I definitely actually did overdo it. So I had like everything on the back burner pretty much while I was writing the book. And not just like work stuff, like personal life stuff. So I've had like loads of stuff to sort out. Since I finished the book, I have to do like promo for it, and oh man, I don't know. I mean, I've always been super busy. Like COVID made it worse, and people that I know here like to joke that I become busier the like more insane the world becomes. So like, unless things start to like be less insane, I'll just be working like this forever. That's how it feels sometimes.
well, hopefully you give yourself some downtime because that's one thing that
It's hard sometimes when you're used to producing a lot, you know?
Yeah, no, I get it, and it's obviously we have limited time on this earth. We want to use it as productively as possible and get as much done as we can. And it's awesome to have that spirit of like wanting to do something important and fulfilling. But enjoying the now is really important too. Just
Yeah, I've like never been good at that. So that's the thing I have to work on. The be in the now. I'm I'm chilled out about some stuff, but my brain's always thinking about like what I'm either writing about or going to write about a lot of the time. And then I'll like zone out and be like in that space while my kids are crawling all over me or something, It's just kind of hard to turn that off when you're so used to it, I guess.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like we keep fighting for for freedoms and our ability to pursue happiness in a way we would like and all that stuff, and then we fight for that so much that we stop pursuing happiness. Like we stop doing the things that make us happy, and we get so caught up in the fight, in the battle. So it's
yeah, that's been me the past like I don't know, 3 years, definitely with COVID, because by the time 2020 came around, I'd already like worked myself like I don't know. I wrote a lot of articles before then. Like I was writing 4 articles a day and stuff at one point. Like that's a lot. So in 2020 I was like, yeah, I should probably wind it down and like work a little less, spend more time with my kid. And I didn't do that when COVID happened. I was like, I have to work now. I can't take a break like I thought. And then I had the book and all that stuff, and it's been a crazy couple of years for me work wise. But I don't think I can keep working like that. Like it can be brutal. My book is like 1,000 pages too, and on top of like everything else I've put out in the past, like just 3 years, right? That's not in the book. It's like a lot of words. So, I'm trying to wind it down a little bit, but like not too much.
Yeah, well, hopefully the book is this is just my interpretation of like writing a book. It seems like you and your whole life, every minute of your day goes into writing that book, and then once the book is finally released and the press is kind of done, you can like relax a little bit. But and then of course you're thinking about what's your next book, what's your next project. So it just is of never ending relaxing, and you never end up getting to that relaxing point because you're just again. But with kids, it's time does fly by, and you have to take a lot of pictures, or you'll forget it all, and the days feel long, and the years feel short. That's kind of my experience with being a parent.
Yeah, that's a really good succinct way of phrasing it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it has great moments, and I really do need to spend like more time offline. Well, I mean I talk about that a lot in my work, right? But I've been a work slave, I guess, partially because I've been really driven to try and inform people about stuff going on, or maybe tell stories that need to be told that aren't being told. And so what ends up happening to me a lot of the time is that I just get that sort of takes over, and I just don't really think about my personal life. I get sort of very sucked into the professional side of life, which is it's like activism, the writing I do in a sense, but I just I think about that a lot, those sort of like big world problems a lot more than the daily stuff. And, that's not necessarily a good thing to do when you have tiny people all the time,
So Jessica, how did you get exposed to Whitney's work?
Oh, God.
I don't.
I've been reading your stuff for a long time. My friend here, who I've only met once, that I met through the merging of the kindred spirits when COVID hit. She, I think, introduced me to you, I think. So it was like a couple of years ago. So yeah, I was well aware of what you were doing, and how amazing it was, and just like blown away like everybody is at the level of detail. And then, I knew you were writing a book because, I watched some things where you were saying it was happening, and then it came out. I still haven't read it because I don't have a copy yet, but it's coming. So I literally can't wait. But yeah, we actually spoke during my little CHD segment the other day, so I learned a lot more about the content, and we also talked a lot about this FTX disaster. So it's like it's really cool to have someone whose brain you can pick, who basically knows everything.
Yeah, so like I wouldn't say that
So, yeah.
because, like when I worked at Mint Press, I wrote a lot more about geopolitical stuff, and like I don't really follow that as much now. And to do that kind of reporting, you have to be like constantly consuming news from all this different stuff like all the time. Like you can't step away from it even for like a day or two, or you're like behind. So I don't necessarily consider myself like well versed in everything. I think when I was at Mint Press and like constantly in that flow of news, maybe I was more knew a little bit about everything here and there, but I think I'm a little more specialized now on some of the topics that I've just ended up covering really over the past 3 years. And since I left Mint Press, I just kind of found I don't know, different niches that I think are important and, work well with the knowledge base that I have. I don't know. It's just hard to do it all, but some people will be like, oh, well, I've never seen you talk about this, so you must be a shill or something, but it's kind of impossible to report on literally everything in the entire world when you're one person. Just saying. There's people that say that though.
Well,
Yeah, what are an example of what they think you should know that you don't? That would be my question.
Well, it'll be
by the way, you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was just gonna say the way that you described the missing a day thing is exactly what applied math courses were like. I did my first degree in applied math, and I swear if you missed one class, you might as well just not come anymore because you're sunk. Like you had to be there every day because it's cumulative. And so, yeah, it's not like the news is like, but it's a similar dedication, I guess, is what it is. But
yeah, well, anyway, there's developments all the time, and if you haven't been following those developments for years, you have to remember stuff that happened like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, or even back more, depending on the region you're talking about. And so, like, if you want to report on like be knowledgeable about every region in the world. That's like really hard, you know. That's why a lot of people specialize in like particular regions when they do geopolitics stuff. So like I guess if you ask for an example, it'd be like, you know, you never talk about this region or this country. And sure, like every region has like its resources, and it's like, you know, microcosm of the macro conflict that we're all talking about. But I mean, it's hard for one person to like cover it all in a way that's like, you know, detailed and really thorough. You know, it's hard to do it all the time.
Yeah,
I don't know. So I don't do geopolitics as much for that reason. It can be really, really stressful, and it's very mentally taxing, or can be.
Yeah, and if you want to get like dig into the dirt and get detailed, and when you do eventually get more focused on one like subject matter, you have to kind of divert your attention away from stuff intentionally anyway. So it just makes a higher quality product, or you know, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but I think it's great. Like it's part of the evolution of your creative self, like to focus in like as you move along the timeline. Like so it's I'm like you though. I want to know everything, and I know that I can't. And I'm, you know, on the subject of like not pursuing happiness, putting it on hold type thing. I find it that's not how I feel. I kind of feel like I found happiness in the chaos. Just it's probably because I have a weird background, but and I've been able to utilize it. But I love being busy. I wouldn't have it any other way. So it's like, although I also don't have kids, so I guess that's a big difference. But yeah, I'm still consumed by the chaos just as much as I was. I don't know how. I guess it's because many things haven't been resolved yet, even though it seems like maybe they are. Or
no, I
like
think a lot of it is just open-ended. The COVID stuff, there's no closure on a lot of stuff, right? It's just open-ended, and you know, the mainstream media here and there is starting to like admit those people from before we said we're crazy, we're right about some things, and then they just won't address other stuff. But I mean, if people are waiting for like the mainstream media to admit everything we already know, you know, it's probably not going to happen, at least not soon, you know. I mean, even things that are pretty obvious from like almost 100 years ago, they won't go back and admit, depending on how intense it was, you know. Or like the Kennedy assassination. I think like there's been polls that like a majority of Americans like don't believe the official story, but you'll never see that like admitted to in mainstream media even today, right? So, you know, I think it's pretty clear that you know, whoever was responsible for a lot of what was seen in the COVID era are still very much like in control of important levers of society and culture, and are still planning to do bad shit. You know, it's not like that stopped. I think maybe they just decided not to push on the COVID stuff so more because the justifications and the marketing and all of that was really falling apart in a big way, you know.
And I think,
yeah, they'll pick up where they. Sorry.
oh, no, I was just going to say, I was just going to acknowledge the point you made. That's actually a really good point, too, that I know sometimes I try to tell myself, I'm like, you know, live in the now, kind of detach from all this. And I think that is important. But I think one of the reasons why we keep doing this stuff, even if it is mentally fatiguing and exhausting and financially not really a productive thing to be doing in many cases, we do it because we feel like it's important, and it does bring us some sense of happiness and fulfillment. We feel like we're contributing to leaving the world a little better than we received it. And so I think you're right. I think you're making a really good point that maybe they're not two separate things, you know, finding happiness, being happy, and also doing your work. You know, I don't ever.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you have a balance, like I just happen to have a really taxing work time and the most taxing time in my family life, which is like having tiny kids and babies at the same time. So, you know, now that like I'm more established in my work and that my kids are getting older. Well, I still have my baby's about to turn a year, right? So eventually, you know, at some point I'll be where I can sleep again. But it's it's just it's going to be easier to balance that now. So I think over the past like 3 or 4 years, especially really 5 since my daughter was born, it's been like just very intense all of the time. And when you're like a parent, you know, and you're like exhausted from work, it's not like you can take a vacation from your kids, you know, when you need a vacation from work, like you don't really get sometimes that downtime that you're used to before you're a mom or a dad, you know. Like I don't have personal time, like hardly ever, or at least I haven't, you know, the past 3 years. And for some people, like you need that time to be like alone and recharge, I guess. And I've had like a lot of lack, but I think it's just like a personal, a lot of the stuff I was talking about in this context was just more a sort of a personal thing. And hopefully that'll explain to some people why I haven't written as much this year, aside from the fact that I wrote a 1,000-page book. So, you know.
Well, Jessica,
hopefully people will read that.
Jessica and I have talked
Can
about.
I
Go ahead.
I ask you what a horoscope sign you are, Whitney? I have a bet going with someone. Did you hear that?
Like where my son is or something?
Yeah. Like, are you?
Yeah, a Libra.
Sorry?
A Libra.
Oh, wow. You're the balance. Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, but I'm just
My
talking
friend
about
bet
how I'm not in
Capricorn and I
balance.
bet Aquarius.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah, you're probably more in balance than you think.
maybe.
That's what I'd say. Yeah, I think it's probably I'm probably one of those people that absolutely needs to like break away and have some solitude. Like that's usually when I like do exercise or whatever. So I like multitask even when I'm not multitasking. But yeah,
I'm like that, but it's hard to do
yeah.
with kids sometimes. Like my baby has had the stomach flu for like a few days, and so you know I haven't gotten to do anything. Forget exercising, you know. So, but I mean, it's a phase, right? So like once kids are older, it's like a lot easier. So I have like a 5-year-old and a 11-month-old. It's like, you know, time intensive here. So
Yeah, you're getting to that point where they can kind of take care of themselves eventually. My son's
yeah.
My daughter's 6, and it's like it's not really a lot of work anymore. To you know, I just feel like I'm hanging out with my friends. Like we stuff. You know, if they're hungry, I get them stuff. But the thing about being a parent is like there's a lot of stuff that you do during the day that it doesn't seem like I should be tired all the time, but like all the getting them food, then oh they need to go to the bathroom, they need to do this, we're going to the park, we're doing it's like I don't feel like it's not like a workout. We're like, oh, I'm tired from my workout. It's like I'm just tired from all these little tasks. You know, it's not just
No, totally. Exactly. It's cumulative and exhausting.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, there's great moments. Like just before this interview, I introduced my son to like cherries cut up for the first time, and he was just like mind blown. And he's like about to be a year, so he's getting like the pincer thing down, you know. But he like grab it, but when he gets to his mouth, he just smushes it. He smushes it all in his face. So he's adorable. So I mean, you know, it's exhausting, but stuff makes up for it. The thing with me is that like I hold myself to a really high standard for work, like how much I produce, how good the article is and all that stuff. And so like if I feel like I'm not producing because I'm like exhausted from other stuff, like sometimes I'm hard on myself or have been in the past, you know. I've made a lot of strides getting over that, but man, I'm not doing another book for a while. I guess that's my conclusion of this whole you know, spiel so far.
Doing all those interviews, I mean, hopefully that brings you a lot of book sales. People go out and get the book. I promise we will start talking about it very soon for people who don't know what it's about. This is the type of show we do. Well, this is my dilemma I always run into. It's like I know you've been doing a lot of interviews. I know that you've been asked a lot of similar questions, but obviously talking about the book is important because obviously you want people to go out and get it. But I also like having the casual conversation and kind of shining light.
Well, I know. I was like, all right, I'm going to go on Ricky's show. We're just going to shoot the shit for a while and then we'll get into the other stuff. That's all right. It's nice though. It makes for a different interview. I mean, I like it. I appreciate you, Ricky. So I'm sure your audience does too.
Me too.
Some do. And then some are like, it's an hour into the show. Will you talk about something of substance? But
no, man, this is the dirt. This People want to know.
Well, people
Yeah, it's the lore. Anyway, sorry.
Yes, it is.
One thing that you said too is keeping up with like everyday news. I stopped doing that a while ago. I know the world doesn't believe in genders, but I say like you're the female version of James Corbett in regards to like my two favorite researchers, and just you put in so much work into these historical things that are important, and I think sometimes that's important to kind of focus on this historical thing or these connections or these stories that maybe have been overlooked because some people are just so caught up in the now. What's the hot topic now? And when COVID happened, I found myself, and I think many of us found ourselves keeping up with the now because things were unfolding so quickly. But
Yeah.
I think what you do and what Corbett does is really important because it's timeless work. It's stuff that's going to be timeless forever. People can read it at any year, any time, and it's always relevant and important. So I think sometimes keeping up with the news when you're doing, like Tim Pool, he keeps up with like everyday news, and I'm just like, you get so caught up in that. Like not every story needs that much attention. Or
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people in alt media today are very, and this isn't everyone, of course, but there's the people that put like money first, and clickbait first tend to be very focused on just like repeating mainstream media. Look how insane it is. Look how absurd it is. And let's talk about it and like get all upset and outraged and like strung out. About how insane the news is like today, and a lot of those stories, like I mean, when you have too many people with big platforms focusing on those stories, not enough energy and resources in the alt independent media scene is going into like original investigative work. So like I'm very happy to be compared to someone like James Corbett, but there's really not that many people anymore, in my opinion, in independent media that are doing like original investigative stuff anymore. Like a lot of it has sort of become about commenting on stuff other people said, or commenting on what mainstream media said, or commenting on what the government officials say, and there's just not enough people really looking at what's going on under the hood of the stuff that's being pushed out in front of us right now. And I think people should be wise to this right now, that the establishment uses stuff to distract you so you're not paying attention to what's going on like under the hood, so to speak. And so like with COVID-19 and stuff.
Sorry, I have this annoying delay, but it distracts people from being their creative selves too, which is like another like big issue that we're facing, the lack of the individual and creative self, because it's like, man, stop copying what someone else is doing. They did that. That's their thing. You do your thing. It's probably going to be awesome. So yeah, I find I completely agree with you, and it's. Wow, it would be so refreshing if people just remembered like to tap into their own thing.
Yeah, but unfortunately, like a lot of clicks and money like seem to gravitate towards people that do a lot of this like outrage over MSM story stuff. And yeah, there are like mainstream media stories that like are outrageous and insane, and Clown World, they come out every day. But how much of our resources should we really be devoting to complaining about that? I mean, if 80% of your content is complaining about that, maybe reevaluate, because there's a lot of other stuff going on that people need to be, informed about. And at the same time, too, I think mainstream media, the only way they get clicks and maintain relevancy with most people these days is by having those outrageous headlines, because that's the only way they can even get people to their website anyway. So, I mean, at that point, you're playing their game. And we're supposed to be the people that are, destroying them and making them irrelevant,
Well, you're making a really good point, because I remember years ago having Nick Bryan on the show with the Franklin Scandal book. I remember you being on years ago, and the Epstein name would circulate in the alternative media world, and we knew the name or whatever, but it wasn't like the name that everybody was using to get clicks, and you guys were reporting on that stuff and talking about that stuff before it was fashionable to do so. And now, because Epstein's a household name, Maxwell's a household name. Everybody wants to talk about it. It's like this stuff was going on before, and like you said, and not in all cases, but in many cases, it seems like you're talking about it not because you think it's important now. You're talking about it because now it gets you clicks, and everybody wants to hear more about Jeffrey Epstein and all that stuff. So I think, yeah, without a doubt, like it's like, what's your priorities? Are you trying to talk about important topics, or are you just trying to get clicks?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of critiques that I think are really valid for independent alternative media. And part of that is because I think we should be holding ourselves to a higher standard than mainstream media. If you want to dunk on them all the time, I mean, there's plenty of very correct reasons you can use to dunk on them all day long. But it's a matter of like resources and where you're putting your audience's attention. Are you really putting it somewhere that matters at the end of the day if you're just focusing on that stuff all the time? It's I don't know, but it's complicated too. Like a lot of people have lost like major revenue streams, or like have lost their channels or their platforms. And so I think some people may have been like, well, I need to resort to this so I can like rebuild like what I had before and stuff. But, in my experience, if you're doing like original stuff, you'll attract attention anyway, because not enough people are doing it. So, if it'll bring the clicks if it's good quality work that, is new and relevant, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. And
yeah.
Oh, did Jessica, you have something?
Well, no, you go ahead. But I do want to ask you guys something after. I have a burning question on this subject matter, of course. So I'll wait.
Oh, no. Share it now, just before I derail us into something else.
Oh, okay. So I'll derail us. Okay, so I'm curious to know what if you guys saw this movie that came out recently called Died Suddenly, because you guys were just talking and it got me thinking about message aversion or diversion, and like the purpose of the message in the first place, and how incredibly controlled the whole thing is, like even more than I even think it is. So I've been watching this. I'll just, make my point and then I'll be quiet. The reaction to this movie, because it's been really kind of split. And my perception is that because I thought it could have been a lot better. I think the footage was fantastic, but I think they should have just kept with the storyline of the proteinaceous clots and followed that through. So in one way it was good, but in another way you can see that it kind of did a disservice, because if you tried to show this movie as evidence to someone who's pro-narrative, they're just going to laugh and whatever. So I was thinking about this psychologically, and I was like, well, what could be the purpose of this if there is one? Like if I was an evil genius and I wanted to do something evil, what would one of those evil things be? And so a friend of mine posted some screenshots of the difference in the number of clicks. This is about the click thing, on the keywords "died suddenly" before the movie and after, to see what the difference was. And interestingly enough, there's been a huge increase, of course. But think about it. Died Suddenly is also, it's not just the name of a movie, it's the name of a side effect or a descriptor that's very real
and very common in
headlines. Of the shots, like,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm wondering, like, if I was an evil genius, I would use that as a diversionary tactic away from people finding good articles or research on say, measure codes associated with dying suddenly. So I'd put them onto this movie, which currently seems to just be the next no, and everyone's distracted again. I don't know. That's just some comments, but did you guys see it?
Yeah, so I watched it. And my concerns is that I think the team that did it is really, really great on production, and just making a movie in general, but I don't think they're necessarily as rigorous as in my opinion, as they should be when it comes to vetting their information. And I think that ultimately does
Yes.
the movie a disservice, because then you can easily have people from mainstream media or whatever catching you on that thing you didn't vet, and then discrediting not just your whole movie, but then all of us that agree with at least major aspects of what was covered in there. Yeah, so I don't know if you want to share your thoughts, Ricky. I can also say more if you'd like.
I didn't see it. I saw.
Oh, good.
Oh, good. It was circulating, but the thing is, there's been so many movies on. I'm like, there's so many documentaries. I feel like Plandemic and some of the early ones were very important because of the timing of it. Like, a lot of people were being exposed to this information, and it was kind of new information for them. But now you're seeing a lot of documentaries still coming out, and it's like a lot of it's just kind of recycling similar information. So I've kind of lost a little bit of interest in keeping up with like newer documentaries. I don't know if maybe that's a good thing or bad thing, but no, I didn't take the time yet to watch it. But it seems like it's specifically about something. It's not like about the whole COVID thing, but it's about people who die suddenly after vaccination. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the gist of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing I was talking about, I won't ruin it for you. And actually, a good point to make here is that the debate has probably driven the number of views enormously. Anyway, it's these proteinaceous clots that they're pulling out of cadavers. Ricky, have you seen about that? Yeah. So this is what their focus was primarily. In addition to having footage of people dying suddenly or collapsing. And that's what I'm thinking. Like, if they had followed through with really good, references and backed up their research a little bit better, then it would have been way better. Because it's really interesting. This is all part of that amyloid theory that me and a couple other people have. Like, it's possible that these white stringy proteinaceous things are amyloid plaques, or similar, the overproduction of fibrin, etc. So I'm frozen, actually. Yeah.
It's
Am I frozen still?
You are. Yeah. Oh, you're back.
Yeah. Gosh, man, my internet is it's just getting worse and worse. There's a technician who comes almost every day and adds a new wire or something to the box.
Oh no.
Anyway, I don't know what they're doing. But yeah, who knows, right? I think they're like installing devices to listen in and stuff. That's just me.
I would not be surprised. I mean, you were one of those experts that were willing to be outspoken during the COVID thing, and I'm sure you were a pain in the ass to many of the elite that Whitney talks about. So let's.
Yeah, I still am.
Oh, good. Hopefully we all are. Whitney, let's get it for people listening, because obviously there's been a lot of people think your new book is specifically about Epstein,
Yep.
right? And it's not actually, right? Like, so
No.
2 volumes. The first one really, I don't think talks about Epstein really at all, right? And you don't
Mhm.
get to Epstein until the second volume. So
most of the second book is about Epstein. So, I mean, if you want the Epstein book, that would be volume 2. So originally, volume 2 was going to be the book, but I realized that so much of the stuff I was covering in the early chapters and setting up who Epstein was, like, you're not really going to understand the significance of that unless you understand those events. So when those events are things like Iran-Contra, for example, you have to go back and explain Iran-Contra and where it came from. And what I wanted to do was end up not just connecting with that, but also connecting with some of the stuff I'd written about previously in the context of the Epstein scandal, which was, past examples of sexual blackmail going like really way back in American history, and talking about how really sexual blackmail is something that was used by to great effect by organized crime. And then when organized crime and intelligence agencies sort of fuse in the World War II era, at least in the United States, that intelligence begins to make extensive use of sexual blackmail, and that really intelligence and organized crime from that point on have had a very symbiotic relationship, and have essentially fused at this point. I feel like that fusion is really how it's been for many decades, probably. And you sort of see this continuity between that particular group and that merging of organized crime and intelligence and the people around Epstein, including Epstein. So in order to get like that big picture, which is really the only way, in my opinion, to really understand someone like Jeffrey Epstein and what he was doing, and why it's very obvious there was an intelligence connection there of like some significance. We don't know the exact everything, right? And I have to sort of allude to stuff in the book and speculate in parts, but I'm pretty clear about when I'm speculating about something and when I'm not, right? But, you're not, if I say, Epstein's one of his first clients in the early 80s when he left Bear Stearns was someone like Adnan Khashoggi, like, if you don't know who that is, like, if I didn't want to do book 1, I could try and explain it in a few sentences, but you're not really going to get it. You know what I mean? So I feel like I had to add that context for people, because a lot of people either misremember or never learned the nature of a lot of these past events that sort of shaped this world that Epstein stepped into and later inhabited. Hopefully that makes sense.
yeah, and really it's a combination of intelligent agencies and organized crime coming together. That's a big part of your story and your book. And what's crazy about all this is that, and it's funny because your last name is Webb, and that kind of the picture that you, what comes to mind is this giant web of like all these connections that is just surreal to think about, because it's like you go down one rabbit hole and then you find out this person's connected to that person, then you learn about this new character, and then this new character is connected to this person, that person. It's like, it's just mind blowing. Was there, obviously doing some research for the book, was there any new characters that were important that maybe you were stunned that you didn't know?
Yeah, I mean, not so much in the Epstein story itself, but in some of the, in sort of tracing this network that led to Epstein, or that rather he became really a part of at some point. You find a bunch of characters that did all sorts of crazy stuff that, I'm like, why have I never heard of this person before? I feel like I shouldn't have known about them. And, invariably you'll find out that a lot of people in deep politics probably do know about them, or people that wrote about this stuff before the JFK era and all of that stuff. Like, these names are going to pop up there and stuff. But, a lot of books like on that particular subject, for example, I read like several years ago, and I didn't go into the JFK stuff like in the book, but it's really the same network I talk about in the book is tied up with that too, like through Perm Index and stuff like that. So you have, so there's a lot of different ways I could have gone to, even with like 9/11, right? But I didn't, that would have meant the book would be like 2,000 pages, so I had to sort of pick what I could include and not include. But I don't know, the stuff that surprised me most about the research of the book was the evidence for this argument that there's been an effort by certain groups in this network to sort of manufacture the rise of ostensible adversaries to the United States, either through like tech transfer or like reallocating money or industry to these other countries. And it happened to like a very extensive degree with like the Soviet Union when that was still around, with people like Armand Hammer and people like that. And then also there was this weird thing like that going on with China and the Clinton administration in the mid 90s. And it's very bizarre. And when you see like this shift now that it's very easy to see now the shift to the multipolar world. Obviously people that have followed my work for a long time know that I'm an anti-imperialist, and I'm no fan of the US unipolar system, or really like the Anglo-American unipolar system. I'm not. It's awful, and it's killed a bazillion people, and is just bad, any way you slice it. But this whole idea of the multipolar world, Ian Davis has made very salient critiques of that, and how it's basically, a lot of the stuff we're criticizing right now, like Agenda 2030, which is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and ESG, and this move to digitizing everything, and the digital ID, and the central bank digital currency. Russia and China are like leading on those fronts. And so if we move into a multipolar world order that's going to be more or less dominated by BRICS countries, yeah, it's not unipolar because it's not one country dominating everything. It's like 5 or whatever. So I guess that's technically better to some people in independent media, right? But at the same time, if you're critical of those policies I just mentioned, all of those countries are marching full steam ahead with those. But so are our countries that are supposedly opposed to this. So it's really a transnational thing. And the more you look into that, you realize that a lot of this nation state stuff that we're sold as being like the top level of power in politics and decision making, there's definitely supranational stuff going on like way above that. And I think if you paid attention closely to stuff in the COVID-19 era, I mean, you saw pretty obvious examples of that, like the efforts, for example, now of the World Health Organization to basically become a supranational entity in the event of future pandemics, right? That they'll have authority above the Constitution of any country, really, to impose, the different interventions and lockdowns and vaccines or whatever that they feel like people should take. Like they can go above a country government if this pandemic treaty gets through and stuff. That's a giant supranational power grab. But for some reason, it's, you have Russia, China, and then the US and Europe, and people that are supposed to be each other's throats at the nation state level, like all agreeing with this. Right. So basically the stuff that surprised me the most in the book is that there was a lot of historical evidence for this supranational argument that's been sort of, at least to me, become a lot more apparent in the COVID era. I think before, like specifically when I was doing more geopolitical stuff at Mint Press, like obviously I was really critical of US foreign policy and still am. And I think it's fair to say, that Russia and even Chinese foreign policy is better than US foreign policy in the sense that, they're not invading countries and occupying a bunch of states and like killing millions of people, but it's that doesn't necessarily mean they're like on our side and we should support them as the saviors of the world, and I think there's some people that sort of fall into that. And so I hope, for people that read the book, they'll see, because Epstein's an interesting vehicle to explore all this stuff, right? There's obviously a lot of stuff about him that was hidden and people want to know that. And so what I tried to do is lay out a bunch of information about this stuff and the connections and the different parties involved to sort of give people a taste of all these different connections. And I don't necessarily analyze them, but when you look at all that stuff together, it's hard to argue against the idea that there is a transnational, faction of people, factions really, that are competing interests, and they don't necessarily have allegiances to nation states. All their real allegiance is more money and power for them at the end of the day. And, that doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, I want the US to be the superpower forever. It can mean something else. It depends on how their agendas and I guess their end games evolve with time and what they want for themselves. It is kind of a complicated situation to talk about, because obviously this group I write about in the book, they have evolved and their agenda has evolved with time, and they're not the same they were in the 30s and 40s where I start the book. But I mean, the modus operandi tend to be the same, and you see those repeated patterns through the decades with the same group over and over again. And I think it's pretty compelling, personally.
Yeah, well, the question I get a lot is people will ask me to like, what was Epstein up to? Like, what was his goal? What was his mission? Who was he working for? And obviously, these are very complex answers to these questions, and I'm not sure I've come
Yeah.
to any conclusion with all the research and reading and listening to work like yours. Uh, do you have any conclusion on what exactly his mission was, or was he just involved in so many different things that you can't really pinpoint that he didn't have just only one mission?
Yeah, so I think sex trafficking was just one of the things he was doing, and I think it was something he did much later in his career for in connection with these factions. As I've said like repeatedly, I think he was mostly first a financial criminal and benefiting this group, right? Like engaging in financial crimes for their benefit. And if you look at intelligence agencies, they need massive amounts of money laundering to function, really, because a lot of their cash flows come from illicit sources. So like the drug trade generates a lot of money for the CIA. That shouldn't really be a surprise to people that have ever bothered to look into that kind of stuff, because it goes back like a really long time to CIA like drug involvement. Like when George Bush Sr. was CIA director, I mean, you just look at his stint and very involved with a lot of illicit narcotics flows and stuff, and that's something that definitely continues with the CIA. And so what we really saw happen with the CIA, like in the 80s, one of the reasons actually Iran-Contra even started is because Congress told Bill Casey he wasn't allowed to give lethal aid to the Contras in Nicaragua. And so basically the question became, okay, how do we get around that, but develop a system where we can do whatever we want and we don't have to go through Congress for approval or for the money to do all these covert operations all over the world? And so a key part of that was that they have to be self-financed. Well, how are they self-financed? Well, what they ended up doing, and this is why the part of Iran-Contra that most people don't know about involves the drug stuff, was about bringing, the cocaine in and all that stuff and laundering the profits and then using that to finance the arming of Contras and other paramilitary groups in Latin America and beyond, and for all other sorts of purposes. I mean, it doesn't even have to be directed at any paramilitary or revolutionary force or proxy war. It can be diverted to all sorts of covert operations. And it's not just necessarily narcotics flows, illegal weapons sales or arms sales, sex trafficking, all of that stuff generates a profit. And that profit is laundered and then put back into intelligence linked coffers a lot of the time. And a key part of this is the offshore financial system, which is why it's no coincidence that you have Jeffrey Epstein set up shop in a big way in the Virgin Islands, and you have a lot of these other entities either in the British Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Bahamas, which, well, surprise, surprise, FTX is there, and Bermuda is another one too, the Cayman Islands. There's a reason all of this is so developed and so secretive. And if you look at the history of that, I mean, it was organized crime and intelligence going back to the 40s, the 30s, and maybe even before, that was really taking advantage of that system and building it to be what it is today. I mean, in a massive way. So when you talk about Epstein being a financial criminal, and that's what I mean. He was engaged in that type of stuff and helping that dirty money become clean money to be used for whatever. And he was also involved in arms trafficking, it seems. Although there's a lot of evidence for it in the 80s, but even in the 90s, I posit in the book that seems to be what his White House meetings were about. Was smuggling weapons into the U.S. through Southern Air Transport, which is the Iran-Contra airline. So basically, Epstein and Leslie, under the guise of using it for Leslie Wexner's companies, had Southern Air Transport completely relocate to do business for Wexner's company, the Limited. And instead of going from Miami to Latin America, which in the Iran-Contra era was all about drug running and arms running, it starts going from Columbus, Ohio, where Wexner and his companies are based, to Hong Kong. And at the time, the Clinton administration had banned the sale of Chinese weapons in the U.S. And before that ban, the biggest market for Chinese weapons in the world was the United States. So there's a bunch of like really weird stuff here going on, because this is also in the context of who was Epstein meeting at the White House? Most of his meetings were with this guy, Mark Middleton. Mark Middleton is a central figure in what is remembered by conservatives today as Chinagate, but it's more complicated than that. It's really like aspects based in East Asia that are tied up with the Iran-Contra network that got into business with state-owned companies tied to the PLA, which is the Chinese military. So it's not Chinagate, I wouldn't really call like an appropriate name. I think it's kind of a misnomer because the real drivers of that were a family called the Riyadis, who were sort of major bankrollers of the Clintons when they were in Arkansas. Like when Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas, some of his main backers were like Jackson Stevens, who was a really corrupt, corporate guy who funded like Bush Sr. and the Clintons, and had a lot of his companies had ties to the Promise Software scandal or Iran-Contra and stuff. So one of his business partners were the Riyadis, and their home, even though they had a presence in Little Rock, Arkansas, their home base was in Indonesia, with a lot of ties all over Southeast Asia and in China as well. And so around the time Clinton became president, the Riyadi family became business partners like of the PLA, basically, through enterprises, major weapons manufacturers and other companies they owned. And a lot of this is tied up with the collapse of BCCI as well. I'm kind of rambling here, but basically there's a bunch of different stuff going on in this particular time that suggests there was some really weird stuff going on with these illegal campaign finance donations between people that were not U.S. citizens based in Asia, tied to the Riyadis, to the Clinton White House. Those campaign funds were being laundered, but there was a bunch of other weird stuff going on. And then you have Epstein meeting with the main guy involved, why he's involved in Chinagate, and then repurposing the Iran-Contra airline to go from China to Ohio, and all sorts of weird stuff's going on. So, I lay out the evidence, why it's weird, and I sort of give my analysis of it, but there's a lot more that needs to come out on that stuff, to say the least, but it doesn't really, even conservatives sort of don't talk about it. And I would argue the reason for that is because at the time it looks like Jeffrey Epstein was more closely aligned with Israeli intelligence than US intelligence. I think in the 80s that might have been reversed to an extent. But I think in the 90s, you have this role of Israel sort of facilitating this tech transfer to China. And when you consider the influence of Israel on the right, how do you get the right to stop talking about a major national security scandal involving the Chinese military? Well, you have to have some pressure from a friendly ally, right, that's tight with the Republicans. So I don't know. I think that's sort of why Chinagate, as it's been called, is kind of a forgotten scandal. But people that know about it have called it the most serious national security scandal in U.S. history, even now. It's pretty significant stuff. And there was a lot of really crazy stuff going on, and there's a pretty big death count tied to it. And it seems to me like an extension of Iran-Contra. And you also have like the early Silicon Valley tied up in that to a significant degree as well. It's really crazy stuff. So, it becomes more complicated to chart this particular group that was like behind Iran-Contra over the years, because that's basically the group that I write about in the book that came from this unit of intelligence organized crime that Epstein was a part of. Danny Casolaro, right? He called it the octopus. Other people have had different names for it over the years, but it's the same group. And a lot of people, trying to trace the octopus have stopped with Casolaro's death in 91. Like, they don't really look beyond that so much. They're like, okay, who is Casolaro talking about? And they look at Gary Webb's work, and they look at, some of these other people, Robert Perry and whatever, that were reporting on this stuff. And they figure out who the octopus was that Danny Casolaro was writing on that. But those guys never went to jail or anything. They were still active even after Casolaro was taken out, right? So what did the octopus do after? If you follow these guys, they were involved in this stuff that's Chinagate, and there's a lot about it we don't know. Congress tried to investigate it, and it was George W. Bush, who was elected ostensibly as a challenge to Clinton's influence, right? Who stepped in to block documents about Mark Middleton, the guy Epstein was meeting with, being made available to Congress. And that was just a couple weeks before 9/11 happened. And then after 9/11, no one cares about Mark Middleton anymore,
Well, the thing is, like you said, throughout Epstein's story and just reading and researching about him, it seems like sometimes I'm motivated to think that he is, linked more to Mossad than maybe,
Yeah.
US.
Hmm.
So it's like,
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, if you look at his first arrest, where did he go right before he was taken to jail? He went to Israel, he stayed in Tel Aviv, and he was taken on tours of military bases. Is that normal for a guy who's like just a rich financial advisor to Leslie Wexner that goes to visit Israel while he's about to face charges for being a pedophile to get tours of military bases? I mean, no. And why would he have gone there of all places? He was probably trying to ask for some help, and then the sweetheart deal ended up happening, right?
yeah.
But I don't think these, even no matter what intelligence agency you're talking about, like they won't save you a second time a lot of the time. If you become more of a liability to them than an asset, which was definitely true for Epstein, the second time he was arrested, they'll take you down. I mean, the same thing happened with Robert Maxwell, right? If you ask Ghislaine Maxwell who killed her father or what happened to her father, why he died, she says he was murdered by renegade Mossad agents and Sicilian contract hitmen. And that's Ghislaine Maxwell saying that. That's what she thinks happened to her dad. But the official story is he just fell off his boat one day. But, most authors don't, that are credible, don't agree with that. Like Gordon Thomas pretty much proved there was a lot more going on than just falling off the boat to do. So, and that's not exclusive to Israeli intelligence either. I mean, pretty much every intelligence agency basically functions as an organized crime enterprise at this point. And so they're very willing to kill people, including from their own ranks, if it's they deem it necessary, right?
Yeah, that's that's what makes his story so fascinating is that I mean, one, he's tied into so many different people like Bill Gates and Dershowitz and Trump and Clinton's, and so he's tied into all these household names and people that we know. But the other thing too is there's still all this mystery behind him. It's like, how did he make his money? Who was he actually working for? Or was he working for, was he a private contractor, for a lack of a better term, just involved in so many different things, or was he actually funded by one organization or one group of people or whatever it may be? And all these mysteries just make it so fascinating. But Pizzagate, when that story came out, and I think that obviously the whole Q movement
is a psyop.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a psyop to like discredit all this stuff. But it's for people like us, it's like it's not out of the realm of possibility that the elite are a part of or connected to child trafficking, because we've been talking about this forever and there's plenty of evidence of it. Then when you look at Epstein, it's just like all the household names, because when you're talking about names that we're not so familiar with, that's one thing. But when people find out that people that they know and they see on TV that seem like decent people are caught up in this, that's when I think, their reality kind of got shattered a little bit. And it helped paint the picture that this term, like the Matrix that we live in, it really is an illusion. Like everything you see on TV, all these personalities, all these people, the truth is much darker and scarier than probably the average person is willing to admit or willing to even look into.
Yeah.
And
but I try and when I'm doing my work, I kind of avoid that stuff, and not because I don't think it's important. I think it's because it's not necessarily that easy to verify and corroborate. So if I'm trying to convince people that there's a lot more to Epstein than you're being told, I want to make a case to people that aren't inclined to understand that, those dark aspects of the upper levels of the ruling class, right? Like I'm trying to make a fact-based case that there's an intelligence connection when you're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, and that he was more than just a sex trafficker, and that there's a reason why mainstream media only lets you talk about what he was doing between 2000 and 2006 and like nothing before and not really very much after either. The focus has been disproportionately on a very small period of his life when he was involved in a lot more criminality than just that. So I'm trying to, sort of expand people's perception of this network, and that, Epstein wasn't an anomaly. I'm basically trying to break down a lot of the mainstream media narratives about Epstein and make people realize there's a lot more to the story. But when it comes to like, adrenochrome and stuff like that, like I'm not going to report on that. If you want to believe that, fine, but you can't really present verifiable, corroborated evidence about those kind of claims, right? And that's what people in the Q verse like to harp on all the time. But like, you don't need to prove that the elite are like blood drinking crazy people to prove that they're criminals. You know what I mean? Like, the bar isn't that high. And they've committed a lot of crimes that we can like note and observe and document and show to people.
Jessica, you had something?
Yeah. What do you think that's all about, Whitney? Like, yeah, can you hear me now? My delay is like crazy. Yeah, so the adrenochrome thing is so funnily fascinating to me. Just because what the hell is that? I find a lot of a lot of these superfluous, crazy sounding stories are the most fascinating, which is probably why people like tend toward them, because everybody likes a story. But what's your opinion on that? Like, where did it come from? Do you think? I completely agree with what you just said. Like, we don't have to prove they're criminals, or prove that they're drinking blood to prove that they're criminals. But like, do you think that has any basis in reality? Like, yeah.
So I mean, there's no like verifiable
that?
information. It's just sort of like coming from people that like either say they witnessed this, or say they know about it, or say someone told them about it. And as far as I know, this wasn't really a common circulating thing until like post Pizzagate era. And that also, dovetailed with a lot of psyop efforts to try and discredit the verifiable cases of things like the Franklin scandal, of things like the Pageboy scandal, of things like Epstein and all of that, when it comes to more verifiable cases of people on the top engaging in like pedophilic acts and using sex blackmail and all of this sorts of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of information on those regards, and that's like what's in the book, right? Because it's, again, there's court cases, and there's like a lot more to meat to chew on when it comes to evidence-based reporting there than on the elite have these rituals and this is what they do. I mean, there's no footage of that, and the people that come out and say they've witnessed it or whatever, I mean, you just have to believe them, I guess, even if they, are they all lying? Like, I don't know, and I don't claim to know either, but I don't want to comment on anything that like I can't document as part of my like professional work. Like, I'll like what take in what they're saying, I guess, but it doesn't necessarily mean I believe it. Because again, I mean, there's so much misinformation out there about this kind of stuff that they seed in to discredit the real information, or divert people that are trying to find out the truth from getting close to something. They want us to look over here instead of over here. There's a lot of things that could, be going on that we don't know about, and they may be even worse than adrenochrome or whatever. But the problem is we have to, get people very quickly to understand that there is really big issues happening, and we don't need to convince them of something like adrenochrome to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think sometimes you can focus on a lot of stuff that can't be verified, and then it discredits everything. But I also think there is this fascination with the elite and the cult symbolism. Like, you start going down those rabbit holes. It, obviously, the Bohemian Grove and all these weird rituals and Skull and Bones and all these weird things. So it doesn't seem like out of the realm of possibility, because they are definitely into some weird stuff that we can somewhat verify, and we know. And in some cases are unexplainable. It's like, why are you guys doing this, or what does this mean, or whatever. So but obviously jumping to those conclusions, you end up turning into Alex Jones, where you end up saying something that isn't true, and because of that one thing that conclusion you jump to, all the other things that are true ends up being discredited because of it. And we don't want that to happen, because like you said, there's plenty of stuff that we can discuss and expose that we can verify much easier.
Yeah, so like I get emails from people all the time where they're like, you should look at this. I have inside information on this. I'm an insider. I'm a whistleblower, blah, blah, blah. I can't verify anything they're saying, right? So how much of that is real and how much of that is like, the powers that be trying to lead me astray? So I'm just going to focus on like what I report on and I think is relevant and an important story, things like that, because like, we really are dealing with like very sophisticated information warfare campaigns from militaries, not just the US, but they are a big purveyor of that, but like countries around the world trying to manipulate us. And so, if I don't want to play into their hands in that sense, like I just kind of have to cut it all out. You know what I mean?
Well, I also get those emails, and I get people who are like, I'm a whistleblower, I want to come on your show. And then you look into them and you're like, either I'm missing out on a huge story or I'm talking to a crazy person, because some of the stories are absolutely insane. And you talk about working at Area 51 or whatever, and I'm like, what do I do if I have them on? I could look like an idiot because this person could be completely, so I'm with you. If I can't really verify it and there's no real evidence of it, it's hard to really entertain it.
But you know what? You know what? I would watch that podcast.
Well, is Coast to Coast still on the air? Because you'll get a lot of those people calling there.
Okay. No, imagine that. That's a good idea for a show. You compile all the weirdest requests and then you get them all on your show, and wow, I'd watch that. Just for entertainment, You need a laugh every now and then.
Well, so not to be a party pooper, but I probably have to go pick up my daughter here in like the next couple minutes.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
sorry.
My internet
Not
is
a problem.
atrocious.
Do all our kids get out at the same time, no matter what continent we're in? Because my
No, I mean it's about to be 5 here, and so I have to get her between 5 and 5:30 at the absolute latest. So I gotta.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not a problem. Well, definitely there, when it comes down to the elites and the whole, I think the pedophilia thing, the reason why that human trafficking and pedophilia gets so much attention and why people are so intrigued with it, because it does seem like it's the worst of crimes, and to find out that so many people in Hollywood, like Weinstein and Nygar and fashion.
Yeah. But you know what's nuts is that like not only do you have like what you just pointed out, like the reason they get our attention so much is because it's such an awful crime, but at the same time there's major efforts going on all the time to normalize it.
That's true.
Right? Like just recently the Washington Post had a review of a play that they said this is a play about pedophiles, but it's brilliant. Go see it. And it's like all about humanizing this group of like people convicted of pedophilia after their conviction, and how they're just regular people. And then you have like the people trying to change the name to minor attracted person. You have the whole like Balenciaga crazy stuff there. I mean, so and I mean, even if you look at mainstream pop singers and stuff, like why is Miley Cyrus making sexy poses when she's wearing a diaper and a baby bonnet and stuff? Was that her idea? Who like gave her a bunch of money to do that? You know what I mean? So, and when you have like these powerful pedophiles in entertainment or the finance industry are connected to all these, influential people or scientists or whatever, I mean, they're trying to make it less of a shocking crime. So I guess if they succeed in that, then maybe we won't pay attention to people like Jeffrey Epstein anymore.
Yeah, amen to that. It's a whole other show, but like the whole what is with the pedophilia thing? It's another thing. Like I just why that? Why is that their thing? I don't get that.
I think it's about power. Like you're taking something really vulnerable and like intact, and you're like making it not intact, and you're like it's a control thing, I think, to a big extent.
Right? Blackmails to one nation under blackmail. It's I think blackmail's a huge part of it too, right, Whitney?
Yeah, well, depending on who's using it, yeah. But I mean, there's like pedophiles that aren't connected to the elite, right? That go out and like abuse children, like either in churches or like, you know, in the neighborhood or something like that, right? So talking about the psychology of it in general, you know, that's what I was sort of referring to. But when it comes to like people in powerful positions, more often than not, I think the sex blackmail pedophile angle is more like girls that don't necessarily look like they're like prepubescent, like they look like young women, but they're really like under the age, like underage, you know, and then they're like, they do like a gotcha at the end, like, oh, you slept with her and we filmed it and she's actually 16 and you're going to go to jail unless you do what you want, you know? So I don't think necessarily the people they're blackmailing are all necessarily pedophiles. And I think the other thing that happens too is that they entrap someone with this pedophilic stuff and then they elevate them into power from the beginning. They control them from the beginning. They don't go and blackmail them once they're elected or powerful or influential. They have people they control from the off that they have ascend rapidly through the ranks, right?
Well, and the world of fetishes, and it's really crazy and weird, and there's some dark places in the, you know, on the web that people like Memory Hold and other researchers have gone down. That's quite, you know, weird and
sure.
You know, I remember, I think we talked about this well, years ago, that documentary Tickled, and about the I think there were college kids that were getting paid to get tickled in their underwear and film it, and they said they wouldn't share it with the public or whatever. And it was this documentary filmmaker who's just like, okay, this is weird. So he starts looking into it. Then he starts getting blackmailed, or not blackmailed, threatened and spied on and all this stuff. And come to find out, like, there was like all these rich people involved in this that would just had this fetish of seeing young kids getting tickled. And then if any of them would talk about it, they would release the video on the internet for all their friends and family to see and whatnot, to embarrass them. So it was like, it seemed like a very simple, like silly website that led down this rabbit hole of like being linked to some very powerful and rich people. And so that type of stuff is just, it's kind of similar, because it's like these weird fetishes of the rich and powerful. And it's like, maybe it is like that Hostel movie that we watched growing up, that horror movie, where just like these elite who just like, they've been to every island, they've been to every, they've had every nice car or whatever, and they're just like, you know, a addict looking for the next fix. And then there's groups like NAMBLA, which is just weird too, you know, like who think that there's actual a logical argument and discussion about this that you can have.
To normalize it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
I still think it's super weird that the guy that founded NAMBLA was like a coin collector and like one of the most influential people in coin collecting. Just super weird. You didn't know that? Walter Breen.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I mean, I already thought coin collecting was weird, but now it's just
no, he was like the coin collector. And like a bunch of the scales that you use to like rank how good your coin is or whatever. Like, I think it's named after him or something. I don't know. Anyway, he's the guy that made NAMBLA. And so now, you know, it's hard not to think that someone that's really into coin collecting is weird, you know? No offense. Breen ruined it for you if you're a coin collector. So sorry.
But so let's let people know where they can get your books and any upcoming projects you might have. But definitely, where's the best places to find your books? Because I don't know if there's a web.
Okay. Yeah. So if you live in the continental US, I would recommend buying direct from the publisher, especially if you want the physical copies, which would be Trine Day, TRINE Day. .com. You can get them there. And I think they also still have a bundle where you can get both physical copies for a reduced price when you buy together. And then you can buy them from Amazon or really wherever you buy books from. And there's also an ebook version that I think Trine Day has for sale on their site, and that you can also get from there's a Kindle version for Amazon, and there's different ebook stuff. And the audiobook should be out, I think, in January. So there's all of that. If you want to stay up to date on developments with the book or any of my upcoming work, you can go to the newsletter for my website. So my website is unlimitedhangout.com. It's not just for my work, other people write there as well. And the newsletter, you just go to unlimitedhangout.com/newsletter. So any new articles and stuff that I put out, or people that write for Unlimited Hangout put out, you know, you'll find it in the newsletter and any sort of resources and information about the book. We have that at the end of the newsletter as well, and updates are about the book, and really whatever else I'll sort of end up in there. My podcast, all that stuff, you can get either from the website, the newsletter, or both.
Awesome. And Jessica, what your website, any of the social media platforms you might still be on? I know you made a return to Twitter. You might be gone now. No, nothing.
No return. There's a claim that all these suspended people are being reinstated, but I haven't been. I don't anticipate that will happen. But Substack, jessicara.substack.com, jessica5b3.substack.com, the Jessica variant Substack. And Jessica's Universe is my website where you can find all my interviews and VAERS analysis and CV and all that stuff.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely have to do a part 2 to one of these. Just like Whitney's book, we need more a part 2 to fit all this stuff, more time to get all the questions and topics out of the way. So let's definitely do a part 2. Thanks again, girls, for joining me. I really appreciate it. I'm glad everybody's doing well. Keep up the amazing work. We'll stay in touch, and we'll talk again in the near future. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you all.
Guys, take care.
Bye-bye.